Then similarly, we can figure out the main effect of competency. Well, first of all, right, um, we know that competency, this variable, is has two conditions, competent and incompetent, right? But because we also have a second factor, which has two conditions, excuse me, we can't just say, oh, this is, this score represents Aaron's perceived competence when he's described as competent, because we also have another condition which also contain any effect of competent, because in this case, in this condition, Aaron is described as cold and competent. So similarly, right, we'll have these two conditions constituting the competent condition, and similarly we have these two conditions constituting the condition of incompetent. So accordingly, we will also have two marginal means at the margin, right? Not means in the cell, but means at the margin. Okay, so similarly then, we can compare these two means to assess whether, right, the score for Aaron's perceived friendliness will be higher than the score for Aaron's perceived friendliness in the incompetent condition, right? That is, we'll compute the difference between these two mean scores. And of course, we can sort of work out the formula very easily between these two means. That is, because marginal mean 3 will be the mean between these two averages, right? So we have C1 plus C2 divided by 2. That will give us this marginal mean. And then we can use, C3 plus C4 divided by 2 to, represent this marginal mean. And then we work out if there's any difference here, right? If marginal mean 3 is larger than marginal mean 4, that suggests the person described as being competent, right? Regardless whether he is warm or cold, because it's a mean, right, across these two conditions, right? Regardless whether this person is warm or cold, as long as this person is considered as competent, this person will be perceived as more friendly than when this person is described as incompetent. Okay? So, as a general rule then, right, to determine main effects, we compare marginal means, right? So if we compare these two marginal means, we will be determining whether or not competency has any effect on a person's perceived friendliness. And if we compare these two marginal means, we'll be determining whether warmth has any effect on a person's perceived friendliness. Right? So as long as there's a difference between each pair of marginal means, right, between this pair, so as long as there's a difference, we say that a mean effect exists. Well, please note that we don't compare marginal means like this, right? We don't compare 2 and 4 or 1 between 3, for reasons that we'll not discuss here, but just remember, we'll only compare marginal means at the same, sort of margin, right? Margin here, right? Okay. Now, let me ask you, let's see if we really understand the idea here, right? How many main effects there will be maximally given this design? That is, at most, how many main effects we can expect given this design without any scores here, right? So you can pause here to think about answers, but I will just proceed to give you the answer and explain why. So imagine you have paused and then resume, right, with your own answer ready. The answer is 2, right? At most, we can expect too many facts given this design because why? We have two factors. Each factor could, right? Remember, I said could. Each factor could have a main effect. Whether or not this main effect actually exists, we don't know at this point. But as long as we have a such design, we would expect two, at most two main effects. One main effect for warmth, the second main effect for competency. Okay, so that's our expectation at most. Now my second question for you, now I give you these four numbers. Then how many main effects actually are there in this design? That is, how many main effects do we actually observe given these numbers? Okay, now you should pause here and work out by yourself. But again, to save time for the clip, I would just go ahead and describe the answers to you. Okay, so more specifically, we can ask, what are these main effects, or if there's only one main effect, what it is. So remember, in the previous slide, right? How do we work out main effects? So let's say we want to work out whether or not there's a main effect of warm. That is, we want to know whether this manipulation between warm and cold will produce any difference in terms of a person's perceived friendliness. Okay, friendliness on a scale from 1 to 7, with 7 as very friendly, 1 as not friendly at all. Okay, so here 7, 5, 6, 6. So these four scores are the four condition means, right? 7 is the mean for this condition, warm and competent. 5 is the mean for this condition, right? When Mike or Aaron is described as cold and competent, etc. Okay, so let's say now we wanted to determine whether or not there's a main effect for warmth. How do we do? Well, as we just said, right? So let's figure out how many conditions are there constituting the condition of warm, the warm condition. Well, very easy. There are two, right? These two, because in both these conditions, Mike is described, or Aaron is described as warm competent, warm incompetent. So these two numbers, even though they also contain the effect of competency, but both contain the effect of warm. Okay, so we can work out the marginal mean very easily. It's 7 plus 6 divided by 2. That's 3. 13 divided by 2, that's 6.5. Now, we can similarly work out the marginal mean for the cold condition, because the cold condition is consisted of these two conditions. Okay, so we have 5 plus 6 divided by 2. There are two of them, right? So it's 5.5. Okay, so what is 6.5 divided by 5.5? That is 1. Fantastic. There is indeed a difference between these two marginal means. That suggests, right, when Aaron is described as warm, regardless whether this person is competent or incompetent, Aaron will be perceived as more friendly than when Aaron is described as cold, because 6.5 is larger than 5.5. There is positive 1, so there is at least one observed main effect. Okay, then is there a main effect for competency? So to work out the main effect for competency, we'll work out these two marginal means, right? So these two marginal means, the marginal mean for competent will be 7 plus 5 divided by 2. That will give us 12 to 6. The last marginal mean, 6 plus 6 divided by 2, that's 6. So what is 6 minus 6? That's 0. That suggests, right, regardless whether this person is warm or cold, but the manipulation of competency. That is, a person can be described as competent, or a person can be described as incompetent. But regardless, right, the description, competent or incompetent, the person will be perceived as equally friendly. In other words, the manipulation of competency does not have any effect on a person's perceived friendliness. So 0 means there's no difference. In other words, there's no effect, right? So here there's only one observed main effect. Despite that, there could be two, right? And the main effect is warmth, right? Okay. We'll scratch this, right? Okay. All right. So here, there's some exercise for you, which I hope you could complete. I might consider actually making them your homework. So let me find out later, right, after this class. Okay, so after we learn about what is, what a main effect is, now we can consider what interaction effect is. Interaction effect describes the joint effect of two factors or more than two factors in one experiment. So interaction effects are defined as, or will occur when the effect of one factor or one IV on the dependent variable is moderated by the effect of another independent variable. You might say, well, that sounds familiar because I seem to recall we've talked about moderation in a previous class. You're right, right? And that's when we discuss, the different types of relationship between two variables or more than two variables, right? Is that? I believe one example is, income would positively predict people's happiness in one country, let's say in the US, right? But income does not predict a person's happiness in another country, China, for example, right? Well, of course it does in China. We all love, having more money, but let's, make this up for the purpose of this, example. So here is moderation, because, obviously the two effects are different, right? Depending on, the effect of income on happiness is different depending on the effect of another variable, which is country here, right? Country is not a variable. It takes the value of USA or the value of China. So in USA, there's a positive effect of income on happiness. As people make more money, they're more happy. But in China, this effect is absent, right? Regardless you make, how much money you make, you can make very little money, a lot of money, but your happiness score does not change. Okay? So this is exactly what we mean by interaction effects. In other words, income and country, these two factors, they interact to impact a person's happiness. So when an interaction effects are present, you might ask, well, then how do we know, right? Actually, of course, we can make this up and plot, these two lines, but how do we work this out with numbers? And whether there's a general rule that we can use to work out the presence or absence of any interaction effects. Well, actually there is, and it's quite a mouthful, and be prepared. So we say when an interaction effect is present, the following must be true. That is, the effect of one factor in one condition of the moderator differs from its effect in another condition of the moderator. What is this? Okay. Don't worry. Let's work this out. But first of all, let's sort of dissect the sentence. The effect of one factor. This actually should be rather familiar to you now, because if we go back to a single factor two condition design, right? Warm cold. We know we can easily work out whether or not this factor warmth has any effect. We simply compare the two averages from these two conditions that constitute this factor warmth, right? Warmth. If these two, averages are different from each other, then we say, well, there is an effect of this factor, right? This factor. So that's it, the effect of one factor. All right, then what about this sentence? In one condition of the moderator, and that is different from its effect in the condition, in another condition of the moderator. Well, first of all, we should know that moderator is just a variable, like country. And here the country has two conditions. One is USA, second is China, right? So the variable, of course, will at least have two conditions, two values. That's the first value of this moderator, this variable, and that's the second value of this moderator or this variable. So this sentence simply means the effect of one variable will be one thing. Let's say the effect of variable in one condition of the variable, let's use, I don't know, y here, okay? So let's say the effect of one factor in one condition of the variable, let's denote that as y1, and let's denote the effect of one factor, right, its effect, in another condition of moderator as y2. So this sentence simply means if there's a difference between y1 and y2, then we have a moderation effect, or we have an indirection effect. Simple, huh? Okay, let's be more concrete. So let's consider this 2x2 designs. First of all, let me ask you, how many factors there are? Answer is 2. One factor, 2 factors. How many conditions are there in each factor? In each factor, right? So for the warmth factor, it has 2 conditions, warm, cold. For the competency factor, there are also 2 factors, competent, incompetent. So the answer is also 2. So the effect, so let's now dissect the sentence in relation to that design. Presence of the interaction effect. The effect of one factor in one condition of the moderator differs from its effect in another condition of the moderator. So now let competency be the moderator, right? Moderator. It has 2 conditions, competent, incompetent. Okay? So then let's see the part of the sentence that it just, make red. The effect of one factor in one condition of the moderator. Now we know the moderator is competency, and one condition of the moderator could be competent. Okay? Competent is one condition of the factor competency. So this sentence simply asks, then what is the effect of the factor warmth in the competent condition? What is the effect of warmth? That is there any difference between warm and cold in the competent condition? Aha, you will say there should be, because in the competent condition, the warm Aryan is given a 7 for his perceived friendliness, and the cold Aryan is given a 5 for his perceived friendliness. So yes, there is. There is an effect of warmth in the competent condition. In other words, there is a difference in his perceived friendliness when he is described as competent, and with regard to the effect of warmth manipulation, right? So warm minus cold, 7 minus 5 when Aaron is competent is 2. There is indeed an effect because there's a positive score here, right? There's a different score here. Okay, now let's look at the blue part of the sentence. Then what is the effect in another condition of the moderator? The moderator is competency. And we just looked at the effect of warmth in the first condition of moderator, that's competent. Then another condition of moderator will be incompetent. So the question becomes, what is the effect of the factor warmth, or the difference between warm and cold, in the incompetent condition? You would say, aha, we should find that out by subtracting 6 from 6, because that will be the effect of warm versus cold in the incompetent condition. Turns out the effect here is 0, because, well, 6 minus 6, that's 0. Is 2 different from 0? How do we get the 2? That's the effect of warm versus cold in the competent condition. 7 minus 5, that's 2. 6 minus 6, that's 0, and 0 is the effect of warm versus cold in the incompetent condition. Is 2 different from 0? 2 minus 0, that's 2. Of course, these two are different. So, yes, when the effect of warmth in the condition of competent differs from the effect of warmth in the condition of incompetent, there is an interaction effect. So yes, warmth interacts with competency to influence Aaron's perceived friendliness. Okay, so that's how we work out whether or not there is a interaction effects given a 2x2 design. So here is how we can verbally describe this interaction effect, right? So a warm individual is perceived to be more friendly than a cold individual only when this person is described as competent. When this person is described as incompetent, being warm or being cold does not influence the person's perceived friendliness because these two scores are exactly the same. Okay? And interaction effects, if we follow the same logic, are said to be absent when the difference between the cells are the same, right? So if, imagine, right, we have this design here, right? So the difference between these two cells, okay, the difference between these two cells is 1. The difference between these two cells is also 1. 1 and 1 are the same, so there's no interaction effect. You can also work out in this direction. Difference between 7 and 6 is 1. Difference between 6 and 5 is also 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. There's no interaction effect. Okay? So in other words, interaction effects are present if the differences between cells, the differences between the cells are different, then we have interaction effects. If the differences between cells are the same, like this, we don't have any interaction effect. Okay, isn't this cool? I hope it is. Alright, so now again, I have several exercises for you. Okay, you should work out whether or not you have main effects and interaction effects. Okay, so I believe there's another assignment to be due very soon. And please bear in mind when you submit your assignment, make sure you save your assignments as MS Word files, .doc or well, preferably .doc because my computer cannot open page files. Okay, thank you, and I will see you next week.